Meanwhile, President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping met by phone this week. The White House hasn't released details, but called the conversation a check-in between the two leaders. But almost immediately, fallout from that check-in, dozens of Chinese warplanes and naval ships were spotted around the island of Taiwan. What was gained by the phone meeting, and is Chinese action against Taiwan coming sooner rather than later? Here with analysis is the president of the Population Research Institute, author of the riveting new book, The Devil and Communist China, From Mao Down to Xi. Please welcome back to the program, Stephen Mosher. Steve, before we get to the book, I need your impressions of this phone call between Xi and Biden this week. We don't have detailed reports, as I mentioned. They discussed apparently climate change, AI, the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and Taiwan. And no sooner was the call finished than we saw those reports of military planes and warships around Taiwan, obviously coordinating a display of force. What have you been hearing about the subject matter of the call, and what does the massing of Chinese military assets tell you about China's intention toward Taiwan?
Well, China's intentions toward Taiwan remain what they always have been. That is to say that the Chinese Communist Party is determined, as it was under Mao, so it is under Xi Jinping, to recover the island of Taiwan by force if it does not simply surrender. Well, the people on Taiwan don't want to surrender. 75% said that they would actually take up arms to fight any communist invasion. I'm not sure what the phone call accomplished. I'm certain of one thing, though, Raymond. If the phone call had accomplished anything, if there was any sort of agreement reached, even a verbal agreement, we would be hearing about it. It would be shouted from the rooftops. The fact that they're only saying we had a sober discussion, a serious discussion about a number of topics, means that both sides agreed once again to disagree. We are fundamentally at odds with the People's Republic of China. And in their view, at the end of the day, only one country will be left standing. We need to keep that in mind.
Janet Yellen, she is in China this week. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is scheduled to make a separate visit soon. Now, Yellen's message, part of it, in addition to what you just discussed, I hope, is that China is overproducing goods, particularly clean energy goods that the world can't absorb. Do you believe China's going to suddenly stop production of electric vehicles and batteries that this administration has mandated a market for?
No, absolutely not. And the Chinese Communist Party several years ago picked 11 different areas, high-tech areas, that they were going to subsidize. And electric vehicles and solar panels and so forth are part of that package. The Chinese Communist Party provides huge subsidies to these industries, which is why they overproduce goods and undercut the market everywhere. They sell these goods overseas, in some cases, Raymond, for less than it costs to manufacture them. And remember that when you're talking about manufacturing solar panels in eastern Turkestan, what China calls Xinjiang, you're talking about basically using slave labor of Uyghur Muslims to produce the solar panels in environmentally hazardous conditions. That's what the Chinese Communist Party is sending around the world. And that's what I'm afraid, as long as the U.S. government keeps paying them to do so by subsidizing the importation of these things, that will continue.
Yeah. China continues also to curtail freedom of religion within its borders. In March, we heard reports of a new national security law in Hong Kong, what the communist government is now calling treason. Now, this law could threaten the sanctity of the Catholic confessional in Hong Kong. Tell us what that would imply.
Well, the law requires anyone in Hong Kong, as the law in China itself already requires, for anyone who has any information that concerns national security or lawbreaking to report it immediately to the authorities. So it's not just as if you can voluntarily go in and report to the authorities that a foreign national is spying or that someone has stolen something. It's that you have a positive duty to report anything that you think may be a crime. And it's intended to set everyone against everyone else. It's intended to isolate people in individual cells of fear so that everybody becomes an informer for the government, in the same way that in Eastern Germany, for example, under the Stasi. Half the population virtually were informants of to the state police. The Chinese Communist Party would like to turn everyone in China into an informant so they could have everyone watching everyone all the time in real time.
Steve, operating under that still secret Vatican-China agreement, we still don't know the full details of, the Holy See recently sponsored a dialogue between Taiwan and Hong Kong as the Church prepares to issue official rules on the engagement with Confucianism. Now, Steve, what's the goal of this dialogue first, within China and within Taiwan? And why is this of more concern to the Vatican and the Holy See than the persecution of Catholics?
You know, that's a very good question, because the Chinese Communist Party, from its very beginning, has done its best to kill and to destroy Confucian thought, which, of course, was part of the governing ideology of China for 2,000 years. So Confucianism in China today is basically a dead letter. So I don't know why the Vatican is looking a century in the past to revive an ideology that's no longer practiced in China itself by the vast majority of the Chinese people, and to which the Chinese Communist Party is overtly hostile to. And instead of concentrating on helping Catholics in China, millions of Catholics in China now are under pressure to join the Patriotic Church. Priests and bishops under pressure to join the Catholic Patriotic Association. And the most heartbreaking thing I've heard came from an underground bishop who recently said, in the past, he said, when we were persecuted, arrested, put under house arrest, sent to prison, we at least knew that we had support in the Vatican. Now we don't know where we stand.
Let's discuss your brand new book, The Devil and Communist China. You trace China's current version of totalitarian communism back to Chairman Mao Zedong. But the ideas, the tactics employed by Mao, they came from somewhere. And in the introduction of your book, you write, the use of terror as a tool for political control continues in China to the present day. Mao's ghost can be seen at work in the genocidal attacks on the Uyghurs, the persecution of the Falun Gong, and the insane COVID-19 lockdowns of entire provinces. The communist system that Mao created in China, inspired by Marx, weaponized by Lenin, and exported to China by Stalin, continues to devour large numbers of victims to the present day. How can you make a revolution without executions, Lenin decreed? And people have been dying by the millions in China ever since. Steve, I guess my question is, in that report you cite, or in your book you cite, the total death toll from the 20th century communism approached 100 million. China topped the list with 65 million of those deaths. You think those numbers are underestimated. Why?
Well, I do. Well, first of all, I add to that number the tremendous number of people who were killed during the Chinese Civil War when the Red Army was told to cut off cities from food supplies, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people starved to death. I add to that total the number of people who were killed by Chairman Mao using a borrowed knife. That's a Chinese expression, jie dao sha ren, using a borrowed knife. When did he use a borrowed knife? Well, whenever he was in a factional struggle within the Chinese Communist Party, he would betray the leader of the other red faction, the leader of the other Red Army contingent, to the nationalists, so they could be killed by the nationalists. He did the same thing in the Korean War. He sent Chinese troops into North Korea to fight against our troops in Korea, who had just surrendered, who had come over from the nationalist side, who surrendered at the end of the Chinese Civil War, and 250,000 of them were killed. Killing with a borrowed knife. So he was very good at that. Then there's the land reform, millions of landlords and rich peasants killed, all of the anti-rightist campaigns of the 1950s, the 50 million people who died in the famine from 1960 to 1962. And I have to tell you that Chairman Mao was one of the coldest, most calculating and callous people who ever existed on the planet. Because when tens of millions of his fellow countrymen were starving to death during the famine from 1960 to 1962, which he caused, by the way, he said, deaths have benefits, he shrugged. He said, they make good fertilizer. Now, he thought of his fellow Chinese as nothing better than fertilizer. The deaths continue. The deaths continued throughout the Cultural Revolution. And I hold him responsible for the one-child policy. Why? Because in 1958, 20 years before the one-child policy began, he declared, we need to control the production of people the way we control the production of steel and the production of bicycles. We need an Office of State Planning of Births. And that's exactly what happened 22 years later when I was in China.
In the book, you say there are lessons to be learned from studying the motives and actions of Mao and his successors. You add that this book is a cautionary tale about the evil that awaits us if we abandon God and embrace evil. I'll read this little bit. We must not only recoil from Mao's embrace of satanic thoughts and practices, which brought death to the Chinese people, but also deliberately move in the opposite direction, toward the life-giving truths of Jesus Christ, who is the truth incarnate. Now, Steve, the challenge there is, how do you get there for the Chinese people? They don't really have access to pure Christianity. The Bibles are being expunged of Jesus Christ and replaced with Xi and the regime. So how do you get there?
Well, I think you get there eventually by the grace of God. And in the meantime, we tell the truth in season and out of season. And that's the one thing the Chinese Communist Party is fearful of. It has actually published a party directive saying that the two threats to continued communist rule are a truthful accounting of Chinese history under communism and a truthful accounting of the ideology. Why? Because the history is a fabrication. The ideology is a fantasy. The ideology is a fantasy that we're going to build heaven on earth. And instead, of course, Marxism always creates hell on earth, over which leaders like Xi Jinping are happy to rule. Remember that communism is a philosophy based ultimately on hatred of God and hatred of one's fellow man. And I'm not the first person to say that. And I would point out that Archbishop Fulton Sheen and Chairman Mao Zedong, who probably never agreed on anything else, both agreed that communism was an ideology based on hate.
Near the end of the book, you touch on Pope Francis's secret agreement with China and the fruit of that agreement. And you also note the utter silence from the Vatican when it comes to China, the scandals and crimes of China, indeed the coddling of these bishops who are part of the Patriotic Association. And for those who are new to this, that's the government-controlled church. How detrimental do you think history will look back upon this Vatican-Chinese agreement?
Well, I think it's clear, and people in the Vatican have already admitted this as well, Raymond, that the Sino-Vatican agreement, whatever good it did, is now a dead letter. Because not very many months ago, a new bishop of Shanghai was appointed without any consultation, apparently, with the Vatican at all. And months went by before the Vatican reluctantly recognized him as a licit bishop. And they did that because they said they didn't want to leave the flock in Shanghai without a shepherd. There's a question in my mind, of course, a real question about what kind of shepherd they actually got in that process. But clearly, the Sino-Vatican agreement has not fulfilled its primary promise, which was that it would be used to fill the 40 empty sees in China, where all of those people, Catholics in all of those sees, were without shepherds. That hasn't happened. Almost all of those sees remain empty today.
You say in The Devil and Communist China that Chairman Xi is the true son of Mao. How so? And how has that outward face of Chinese communism evolved from Mao to Xi?
Well, let's talk about Mao Zedong just for a minute, because Mao, it's very interesting, as a toddler, was consecrated to a stone god not far outside the village where he and his family lived. He was 3 years old. He was taken out, forced to kneel and kowtow before this stone monolith which had a pool at its foot, but the local villagers thought was inhabited by a spirit. And he was rechristened at that time by his mother, the third son of the monolith, Shisan Yadze in Chinese, third son of stone. And he really did seem to have a heart of stone and have a diabolical influence, throughout his life. In every choice he made, when he was faced with a choice between good and evil, he almost invariably chose evil. When he was faced with a choice of achieving an end by doing the right thing or by deceiving people, he chose to deceive. It's as if he took delight in deceiving. Xi Jinping is cut from exactly the same cloth. Xi Jinping behaves in exactly the same way. He has modeled himself on Mao in all things. Um, the personality cult, the exaltation of him as a kind of pseudo deity. The statues are going up. People are singing his songs. People have to download the Xi Jinping app on their phone and read from the Xi Jinping scriptures every day, so they know what the great Xi Jinping is thinking. So all of the ways in which Mao sought to elevate himself over the people, so Xi Jinping is following the same path.
Yeah, no, it's a good, aside from the costume change, there's not very much difference. The uniform for the business suit, but other than that, the tactics are really the same. And of course, she has brilliantly woven capitalism into this stream of communist practice and totalitarian control.
Well, it's very interesting that the dress seems to change depending on the audience he's addressing. If he's addressing the military, he wears a military uniform. Like a third world 10-pot dictator. If he's addressing the people in some circumstances, he wears a Mao suit. But when he's meeting with foreign leaders, he will, of course, wear a Western suit. But he changes his dress for the occasion. And that, I think, tells you everything you need to know about Xi Jinping. He also is now following Mao down the socialist road to ruin. And what I mean by that is that after the devastation of the Mao years, people remember that Deng Xiaoping had the four modernizations. The West was invited in. We were invited in to open factories and help China advance. And we did gladly because we wanted to see the Chinese people's living standards increased. So a new class of wealth creators arose in the 1990s and throughout the first decades of this century. But their wealth put a target on their back. And now they are being persecuted and purged, and their wealth is being confiscated. The most dangerous place to be in the world today is a billionaire in China, because you can be arrested, tortured, and killed, and your money taken by the state.
We have been seeing, and I suppose this is a symptom in parts of the reality that you're describing. There has been a huge influx of Chinese citizens immigrating through South America into the United States. Now, what do we know about these people coming across the border, and what do you think their motives are for being here?
Well, we know that there's a huge pool of money and people that's desperate to get out of China because the economy is in recession. The unemployment rate among youth may be as high as 40%. The government admits about half that, but the government statistics are laughable. So the money and the people want to get out of China. Now, the thing about that is you can't really leave China without an export visa, without a visa allowing you to depart the country, and a passport. Hard to get. So anyone who leaves China is leaving with the permission of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, last year, I understand that 37,000 Chinese came across the border, southern border, from Central America. They fly into Central or South America and then move northward with the flow. Now, I think some of those are economic migrants. They're simply seeking a better life. I think, however, the Chinese Communist Party would be foolish if it did not salt in that migration saboteurs, potential terrorists, potential spies, who would then go to the local Chinese embassy and consulate and get new IDs when they arrive on our shores, so that we don't know who they are. And I will tell you this, the Chinese government is not cooperating in helping us to identify who these people are. So we have no idea who these tens of thousands of people are and what they might do, for example, in the event of a conflict over Taiwan.
Wow. Before we run out of time, I have to ask you about a recent controversy that really arose through a report that you were a part of concerning Catholic Relief Services. On March 6th of this year, your organization, Population Research Institute and the Lepanto Institute, published a 130-page report summarizing your findings of a joint year-long investigation into Catholic Relief Services, carrying out contraceptive and abortion activities in 3 African nations. Tell us first off, what did you discover?
Well, first of all, I want to tell people this was a serious effort. I mean, this is a long report that took us a year to compile. It is not something we undertook lightly. It's something we undertook in fraternal charity, basically in response to pleas from African bishops, including Cardinal Sarah, whom you mentioned in this, who will mention in next week's program, who talked about the ideological colonization that's going on in Africa, along with Pope Francis himself. We found, in looking at Zimbabwe and Cameroon and Lesotho, 3 separate countries, we found multiple problems with Catholic Relief Services programs there. I'll only mention 3. Let me first mention that CRS developed and used a manual with its own logo on the front page that promoted masturbation as a form of safe sex. Now, I believe we have a picture of this. The logo includes the logos of USAID, PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Reduction, and also CRS. So there's that. The second thing I'd like to mention is that CRS, Catholic Relief Services, created health referral networks that included contraception promoters. That is, in the network that CRS created, there were groups that were doing contraception and doing chemical sterilization through IUDs and implants and Depo-Provera, and at least one abortion promoter whose very logo is an icon of a pregnant woman with an X through her belly. Now, I believe you have that to show on the screen as well. I find that logo very off-putting because it looks like by Xing out her child, she's achieving some sort of freedom, which she's not. If you're doing referrals to groups that promote contraception, abortifacient contraception, and even abortion, that, I believe, is cooperation with evil. The third thing I would mention that we found CRS doing, CRS was the prime implementer, the lead implementer of a program called DREAMS, which was designed specifically to ensure the increased use of abortifacient contraception. In other words, they were putting together a consortium of groups to which they would do referrals of girls as young as 10 years of age, who would then be encouraged to not just use condoms to prevent AIDS, supposedly, but also to use IUDs, implants, or Depo-Provera injections.
Well, Steve, how did your organization vet and confirm these findings?
We had investigators on the ground. We conducted extensive investigations online and then followed up with in-person interviews in all of these countries. Interviews, by the way, that took us several months to complete. And I would say, Raymond, we have been looking at CRS programs for the last decade because there have been repeated concerns brought to us by African priests and bishops about some of these programs. So that's how we come at this.
Yeah, when I read the report, I saw there was an archbishop of one of the countries here that you were focused on who is supporting this and was concerned because he said CRS didn't notify us of what's happening in the country. In fact, they don't consult with us at all. Now, prior to the publication of this report, you and Michael Hitchborn sent a cover letter and a summary to every bishop and archbishop and cardinal heading a diocese in the United States. On March 8th, Bishop John Wester of Santa Fe responded. He's also a member of the CRS board. He condemned your report. He wrote, as a former 2-term member of the board of directors of CRS and a current member of the Catholic Relief Services Foundation board, I can assure you that your findings on the ethical actions of CRS are in error. CRS has consistently sought the judgment of prominent, well-respected moral theologians in those activities that may have moral ramifications. In each case, the theologians assured CRS and us board members that there is nothing being done by CRS that is immoral or unethical. Your persistent persecution of this wonderful organization, which helps millions of people every year throughout the world, is deplorable. I pray that you might gain the prudence to cease and desist. That was Bishop John Wester. How did you respond to the bishop's criticism and his call to cease and desist? And have you heard from other bishops?
Well, we have heard from Bishop Strickland, and in the past, in response to our reports, we've heard from other bishops, such as Bishop Sheridan, now no longer with us. But we will not cease and desist telling the truth. That's why I'm here, Raymond. That's what my purpose in life is. It always has been. And telling the truth got me fired from Stanford 35 years ago. I'm not likely to stop now. And I will not stop repeating what Pope Benedict XVI said in his motu proprio on the service of charity. He said specifically, in particular, the diocesan bishop is to ensure that charitable agencies dependent upon him do not receive financial support from groups or institutions that pursue ends contrary to church teaching.
There's certainly a lot of unanswered questions, and I mean, that 130-page report does detail some activities that need answers, I think, particularly now. And the letter did avoid answering any of the particular charges leveled here. And that accounting does, I think, need to happen. The Devil in Communist China, From Mao Down to Xi by Stephen Mosher is available now at bookstores everywhere and online. Thank you, Steve.